Hi, I'm Diana Giselle Yanez, host of Highly Sensitive Money. I'm a money coach, certified financial planner, and highly sensitive person who brings money and social justice together. I grew up questioning why we have poverty in a world that can provide for everyone. In this show, I chat with highly sensitive people on how they handle money and with money experts on how they cultivate social justice in their work. Join us as we explore money and sensitivity while honoring that all of our well being is connected. Today, we're diving into the world of faith aligned impact investing with Anne and Bill Hatch. This beautiful couple shares their journey of combining Catholic social teaching with finances to create positive change in the world. From starting their own consulting firm to joining the Francesco Collaborative, the Hatches offer insights on balancing family life, embracing high sensitivity in business, and building a community of like minded investors. Whether you're curious about impact investing, faith based finance, or simply how to align your career with your values, this episode has something for everyone. All right, Bill, Anne, it's such a pleasure to have you both on. Welcome to Highly Sensitive Money. Bill and I met through the Francesco Collaborative. Was it last summer or 2 years ago? I think it was 1 year ago.
Oh, exactly a year ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was a year ago. And that organization is focused on bringing values aligned investment to, and also like bringing together the Catholic lens. And for me personally, as someone who grew up Catholic, I was kind of repulsed by it. And yet I still found it really, really helpful. Bill, if you want to share some of your story of like how you got to the Francesca Collaborative and bring in what you're doing right now.
For sure. Well, Deanna, thanks so much for having us. We're big fans of you and your work, and we're big fans of the podcast. So it's an honor to be with you, sharing this space today.
Yeah.
My journey to that Francesco Collaborative workshop where we met started back in 2009. I was a fresh graduate and moved to Singapore to seek my fortune. I grew up in a non-religious household. So the only gospel that I aspired to is one of hard work and success. And pretty soon after arriving in Singapore, I started working for a large multinational corporation, helping them develop a clean tech and energy transition investment business, which was really aligned with some of my deepest longings at the time around using my career to respond to the climate crisis. But there was something that work wasn't really feeding in me. And I had this sense that if I got to the end of my life and the epitaph on my tombstone read that he had done X number of projects or X number of investments, that wasn't going to be a legacy that I really felt proud of. And so, in combination with a few other things that were happening in my life at the time, that actually led me to consider faith and spirituality for the first time, I moved back from Singapore to my hometown of Toronto and started volunteering in a local downtown, lower income parish in downtown Toronto, which turned into a full-time job helping with social justice ministries. During that time, I met Anne, and we met over at an ultimate frisbee game and fell in love and got married. So that was clearly, yes, the hand of God at work coming back from Singapore. And slowly but surely, I started to veer back to working in finance and investments, but this time for nonprofits and seeing the needs that were there of people who had big hearts and big aspirations for their mission, but also needed someone who could connect the dots in terms of their strategy and their finance and the investments. And so around the time I did the workshop with you, Diana, I've been asked to join the investment committee of a big uh, religious congregation in Canada and worldwide, the Jesuits, and help them start their own impact investment journey. So I'm going to stop there because I feel like I've already answered half of the
Well,
first question.
I'm excited to have you both on. This is going to be the first like two-person interview that we do at Highly Sensitive Money. And when I first reached out to Bill, Bill asked, could Anne join? Because Anne is also part of the organization that you guys have now built. Thank you, Bill, for kind of introducing a very like short version of how you got into this work of impact investment. I'd love to hear like, Anne, now how have you come into the work of impact investment? Is your background also in finances, or what had you decide to work on this together?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, no, so my background has been in healthcare in Canada and more on the strategy and planning, which obviously has a financial element to it, but definitely more on the helping people to think through the work and to think through it so that it's coherent and that they've got a broader plan rather than just react, which we also find with nonprofits that sometimes people are so overworked and so overwhelmed because the needs are so great that they don't have the time to kind of slow down and think through that and then maybe make their lives a little bit easier on the front end by doing a little bit more reflection and thinking about the work itself. So I think that's how we decided to go into it together is Bill has this really great background in finance and investments and all of that. And I've got kind of a complementary background, and we just figured the two of us together make a really good back office for somebody who needs a little bit of this and a little bit of that in order to think through the next little while for them.
Yeah, that's really amazing. And I also know you just had your third child, right? So you guys are managing a very full household and also your firm.
Yeah,
Tell
and
me.
I will say, Deanna, I'm taking part of the work that we've done. I've been supporting Francesco Collaborative in a more, you know, starting with like quarter time around the recruitment stuff or the early community weaver post, the net carrying and the contemplation that we were kind of dreaming about and co-leading. So I am going to be taking on a full-time role with Francesco, and so this our hatch and hatch thing is kind of like, I
We're
don't
trying
know.
to figure out how, yes, is this just kind of absorbed into Francesco or is it, oh,
Or will we continue to kind of moonlight and be
yeah,
open to sort of like,
other consulting gigs?
yeah, in this season, it's going to be more about Francesco and Catholic Impact Investing Collaborative. So
But I think that's kind of the fun part for us is the like evolution of Hatch and Hatch as we started, what, 2 years ago was it? Anyway, and just seeing like where it's going and where which client needs what and what's most interesting and being able to kind of follow that path has been really fun. Yeah.
when we started Hatch and Hatch, we had just gotten married, and one of the impetuses for thinking through this business was when we were pooling our own savings and investments together and wondering how we could not just make our investments an expression of our values, but actually find joy and meaning and a sense,
That you're lifting society up with your money rather than making as much money as you possibly can with your money.
and at the time I was working and was on maternity leave. So we have three kids, 3 and under right now,
Yeah.
and was on maternity leave from her government job. I was working as executive director of a retreat ministry. And we were also thinking about ways that we could um, follow God's call for our vocation in a way that could also make ends meet for the family.
Well, and I think too, the right at the beginning, there was some discernment of which career path Bill should follow in terms of like, do you go work in a big bank, do whatever. And you talk to a lot of people in the span of 6 to 8 months, I want to say. And I think we realized that what you found most interesting didn't exist. Honestly, like the role itself didn't like that combination of kind of Catholic social teaching with investments and just the way to kind of think about money a little bit differently than the average person does in this world right now. Um, yeah, which So I think that was part of the impetus to just be like, well, let's just start our own thing and see if there's a need that other people have that isn't being met that maybe we could help them fill. And then Francesco Collaborative, the workshop was so helpful for us thinking through all of the pieces of that. And yeah, so I took over, but go back.
No,
Yeah.
that's great. And I'll plug it a little more later, but the workshop, the Francesco Collaborative workshop brought the best of this retreat ministry work that I had done with people recovering from addiction and homelessness and the vulnerability, the authenticity, but brought it into a community of finance practitioners and people who felt agitated and wanting to do something different, but not sure where to turn. And so, my enthusiasm for what Francesco Collaborative and the Catholic Impact Investing Collaborative have been doing turned into what is now really a full-time role
Yeah.
with Francesco Collaborative, helping to relaunch some of their programs for accredited investors, helping them with their own internal finance and operations function. And so we're really excited about that because that's feeding our hunger to work and journey alongside these different institutional investors. And, that was our hope for Hatch and Hatch in the beginning. So we're sort of just following where the spirit leads.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I want to highlight two things that you both said. It's like you wanted a sense of lifting up society with your money, right? That's initially what started it. And then that time of inquiry that Bill had, or that you both had as a family, of like what you found most interesting didn't exist. So I hear how sometimes creating it on your own, it'll then be easier to then go out and find it, or to let other people know this is what I want.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Yeah.
Like the years of experience that you had with Hatch and Hatch probably made it a lot easier to then talk with the Francesco Collaborative as a potential new place to really follow your vocation.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to
Yeah.
see the really good work that they're doing and think like, oh, we can help them with some of that, with some of the back end stuff also to, yeah, help it keep going.
Mm. And one of the things,
Well,
so I don't know if I remembered, Bill, that, or if I knew, Bill, that the retreat ministry was focused on sobriety, or that kind of thing. One of the things that they talk a lot about in the big book of AA is that God is our employer. So a lot of the times when we're looking at our job, like how work changes, you're like, I had no idea this is where I would end up. But at the same time, in a way, maybe you can see the entire time you've been working for the same employer. It
yeah.
just,
And just
because
have
the
to, oh,
paycheck changes.
yeah. Yeah. That's,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I'm curious, are you going to continue to manage Hatch and Hatch, or like what does that look like? I know you also have 3 kids under 3.
Yeah, life feels very busy right now. I mean, one of the things we're chatting through right now is a client that we had has just come and asked us to do a bunch more work. So we're trying to figure out like, oh, do I take on work and do it during nap times? And what does this look like? Or are we just saying, no, we're focused on Francesco Collaborative work for right now? And that's a current discernment. So we'll see where we get with that. But yes, I think right now I try to focus on less time crunchy work, like something that doesn't have a hard and fast deadline that I can kind of do in bits and pieces while kids are napping or in the evenings. And it's honestly, when it's not overwhelming, which is now infrequent because we try to manage the timeline piece, it's really nice to be able to exercise my brain in a different way than it is. Like I love being at home with my kids, but the intellectual stimulation is not high when you're chatting with a 3-year-old, almost 2-year-old and a 2-month-old. It's a little repetitive. So it's nice to be able to think a little more critically about things. And it's just a good mental break for me.
Yeah. And I love that point about when there's the timeline is
Yeah.
spacious, then it gives you access to just be able to manage both things. You
Yeah.
both have used the word discernment a couple of times. So for people who aren't familiar with it, I'd love to hear how would you explain that for someone who's wondering like, wow, how do you make money decisions from a place of discernment and groundedness?
Great question. Tackle.
Yeah. So going back to the Alcoholics Anonymous big book reference that you made, I think of the first 3 steps of the 12 steps, particularly step 3 of turning making a decision to turn my life over to the will and care of a loving higher power. And what that means to me is that it's not just this area or that area of my life, but it's everything. And pretty quickly having some finance knowledge and studying to be a CFA, I can tell that what we're invested in is not congruent with that. You know, I think, I don't know how to articulate it exactly, but the hope that I think God would have for our financial portfolio. And then the question becomes how. And similar to 12-step programs, it's less about figuring out the answer and more about finding a community of fellow travelers who are also wrestling with the same questions, and then just trusting that if we take the next right action, the next step on the road, that eventually we're going to end up where we're meant to be. So that's how discernment feels for me in a nutshell. I don't know how you would.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think to add to that, I would say we try to pay attention to things that bring us joy and things that maybe do not, and just pay attention to kind of the energy that we're putting into something and the energy that we're getting out of it. Because there's sometimes where you can be really excited about a piece of work, but you realize that the energy that it's bringing to you is really kind of frantic and stressed, and it's not actually what's best for your emotional health, your spiritual health, your family health, and all of that. So I think it's kind of been a continual conversation between us of what are the needs of the family right now? How do we balance that with work that brings us joy, with work that we find really interesting? And obviously like the community piece has been huge of finding kind of like-minded people that we can journey with and be energized by and grapple with the same question has been kind of an obvious when we talk about what brings us joy. Those are really obvious ways to say like, oh, that community has been amazing. Let's go further into that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it kind of reminds me of like Hatch and Hatch started because you couldn't find what you were looking for. And right now, as a solo investor, maybe you're not going to be able to find the investments that align with your values, yet you join a community where there are many different options.
Yeah.
Right. And you learn like by us as individual investors looking at our own portfolio. And then you guys were also looking at institutional investing, right? From religious organizations. It starts
Yeah,
to make a change.
exactly. Yeah. I think we that was one of our earliest kind of conversations of do we help individuals or do we help institutions? And especially in Canada, it feels like there's not a ton that you can invest in individually that is very faith aligned or values aligned. But we thought if we can help institutions start to ask big banks for it, then maybe it will eventually become available to individuals. So that kind of helps. Yeah. Let's go in that direction.
Right now with the Francesco Collaborative, are you going to be focusing more on the community weaving or on the investment side of it? Or
The Francesco Collaborative merged with the Catholic Impact Investing Collaborative, which essentially was a group of accredited investors who were already deploying capital fairly consistently to impact, deeper impact private markets strategies. And they would have in-person meetings, and they had a deal sharing platform, and they would organize pitch forums. And I think the hope of part of what I can bring to Francesco and Seek in this new merged chapter is to take a lot of the best of what the Catholic Impact Investing Collaborative, or Seek for short, is doing, and bring it to the much bigger group of accredited investors that Francesco Collaborative has begun to form and begun to create space for it through the workshop, through the labs, through the summit, in-person summit that's coming up. And I'm not sure when this is going to air, Deanna. So the in-person summit in September of this year. So that's one part. That's kind of like the public part of my work. The other part is like, what is the business model for Francesco Collaborative going forward? Are we going to be doing consulting projects to actually help congregations take the next step and having a more hands-on, building some kind of consulting co-op of different people, expert practitioners within the Francesco community who want to share their gifts and talents with foundations, with congregations. How does the Francesco Collaborative look 5 years from now? And this is where Anne is bringing a lot of her strategy side as well, kind of helping in the background and thinking through that. So
yeah, because I think I think Felipe and Elizabeth would agree is that there are so many obvious needs for this community, and it's just a question of like, how do you meet them in a way that's kind of coherent, so that it's not like, oh, we do this odd thing and this odd thing and this odd thing, but it's like, no, we have, yeah,
it complements the great work of many existing organizations that are doing bits and pieces of it from
brings it together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I feel sometimes that's kind of the difficult part of being a trailblazer. When you're creating something new, you're kind of like, what am I building? There's not like a cookie cutter approach,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And there are so many visionaries in the Francesco community that I feel like it's amazing. It's so energizing. And I have the nuts and bolts, tenacious, roll up sleeves, details, like kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. So
Which is really good.
So I feel like it's very complementary.
Yeah. Yeah. Because then we kind of figure out, they have an idea of the what, and we're trying to help them get to the, like, so how do we do that? What? And yeah, move it along.
And that tracks with like being a CFA. A CFA is literally being as far in the nuts and weeds as you can get of investment management. Well, we've talked about how you got to your current position. I would love to hear, and I know that everything you do is connected to social justice, but for people who are not familiar with the Catholic social justice doctrine, how would you explain it? How would you introduce them to it? Huge question. I know you can take an entire, you're like, come join the Catholic, come join the Francesco Collaborative for a summer.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, you just did the work on the 12 elements of CST, of Catholic social teaching. Just kind of what first popped into my head, but I don't know how to tackle that.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, there's a few ways, I think, to approach that question. One is noting that through the history of the 2000 some years of history of the church, there have been efforts by senior church leaders, by individual Catholics to figure out how do we actually live what Jesus taught. And so documents have been written about the dignity of labor and the rights of workers and care for creation more recently with Pope Francis and Laudato Si. And so there's a really rich tradition of principles to draw on. And if we go back to scripture and Matthew chapter 25, I believe, did you feed the hungry? Did you clothe the naked? Did you visit the imprisoned? The corporal works of mercy, and that each of us, well, we would hope to be doing some more of those things once our kids are a bit older.
We're clothing our children now.
Yes, and feeding our children. But I think the whole Catholic social justice movement is a very diverse effort to kind of live out some of these principles, which have a ton of overlap. I didn't grow up Catholic. I didn't grow up Christian. I think they have a ton of overlap with secular social justice principles. And, unless I'm a theologian or an expert, I might have a hard time, teasing out what the differences are.
Yeah.
So
I think too, that when you look back, just as Bill was talking about, over the tradition of the church, you can see how there's different saints and all of that as you go through, but you can see how each person was responding to a need of the time, which I think is also what we were finding with this now of like, oh, originally maybe they built hospitals because there were no care for the marginalized or what have you. Whereas we have hospitals, we have schools and all of that. And now there seems to be this need of people who want their money to be able to go towards something that they care about. And the existing system is honestly a little bit broken. And so they don't feel comfortable with it. They don't feel good about it. And they also don't really have a right relationship with money in the first place. And so for us, it was also about responding to that need and just doing that from a way that was grounded in our faith. Big. I don't know if that answered the question though.
No, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So responding to a need of the time, right? And our the current way that wealth distribution is made is so extractive.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard for any of us to have a right relationship with money, just given like the interactions that we have. Are you guys familiar with Money and the Meaning of Life by Jacob Needleman?
No.
No. I don't know if he's a theologian, but he's talking about how in our current society, the way that if we're able to make money and have status through money, that's the main way that people's accomplishments are measured. Whereas there's been other times that society has been structured differently, where being like the head of a family or being a pillar of society, or there were other ways that arriving was measured.
Yeah.
And we've narrowed it down, which brings a lot of burden on
Yeah.
money. And it can also be very confusing because money can't do all of those things.
And it's also one of those things where you have some and then you just want more, like a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And there isn't this sense of like, oh, I've made it. I've hit enough. And now I can stop and now I can give. And so also you wanted to help people to have that feeling or that sense of enoughness so that so that the generosity can then start to come out, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, there was also a section also in that book about when people have access to so much money, because it can feel it's very similar to power. They'll rely less on higher power, on God, on fate, right? They're like, I can take care of everything myself. But like you said, and again, we live in a society that doesn't really encourage the sensation of enough. Like we don't know what satiation
Yeah.
feels like.
Yeah. No, and it's also a little twisted in that the people who do have tons of money generally can get whatever they want. Like there's some truth to
Mhm.
that in our society right now. And so it's also holding them to a higher standard because they have great wealth. And with that should come great generosity. But anyhow, yeah. So we would like to help build that somehow.
Yeah, yeah. And in my work, I work with people who have a lot of wealth who are asking, how do I give it away?
Yeah.
Right? What are the right ways and the amount that I keep? How do I invest it in a way that it's aligned with my values? And that's a question that I individually like. I'm like, okay, I need to start doing more impact investing. And at the same time, I'm like a single person that doesn't come from wealth.
Yeah.
Right? So it's always that tension, which I want to work with.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the Catholic social teaching. So as someone who grew up Catholic and honestly had a very not a nourishing relationship with being Catholic, my family became Catholic because of conquest, right? Like I'm Mexican. I
Ah,
remember telling my grandmother that and my grandmother just being like horrified. W- what I've learned about I became Quaker when when I moved to Philadelphia about 5 or 6 years ago, and I remember hearing that it was always the Quakers and the people who followed the Catholic social doctrine who were leading social
mm.
justice protests,
Yeah.
right? There's
Yeah.
something really beautiful about I feel like for myself, maybe because I'm highly sensitive, it's kind of required that I have a spiritual underpinning in my social justice work, or I will become overwhelmed.
I think to one of my first assignments when I worked in a parish, which was a newcomer family that came to Canada uh, from a Middle Eastern country. And I remember working, 18, 20-hour days, helping to secure the apartment and make sure furniture and working with a very large committee and an even larger group of volunteers from the parish who wanted to help, and thinking that when this was all over, I was going to be radiating joy and just this sense of like, oh, I embodied love and self-giving love in action. And instead I was totally exhausted.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the spiritual underpinning is so helpful to be able to come back to, because the work itself is not always rewarding in and of itself.
And I think too, like I was saying with nonprofits earlier, because I think that there's a special kind of burnout that can happen where you're like, no, there's so much need. I need to keep working. I need to give and give and give. Otherwise, this thing will not happen. And so I think that when you were talking about AA and the trust in a higher power, and just being able to say, like, I'm going to do my little piece of it, but then I'm also going to take time to rest, and I'm going to take time to come recover from it. And I'm going to trust that the higher power is guiding this work and leading it. And that I do not need to be the savior of the world because there already is one. And so I think that sense of it allows you kind of to step back from work in a healthy way and kind of put it in its right place of like, this is good, this is useful, but this isn't the be all end all. And I am not the be all end all to, to save all of these people.
Yeah. One thing I had to learn myself and that I often remind other people is that I also need to be included in part of community, right? Like I'm serving community, but I am also community. Like I can't
Yeah.
give from an empty well. And I think for most people that I know, like everyone goes through that stage of overgiving.
Yeah.
As we're
Yeah. A good learning
trying to,
experience. And then
yeah.
you hit a wall and you're like, I can't give anymore. This is, yeah.
And then you have kids, and that's every single day of your life.
In the most beautiful way. But no, and I think too, it's something we kind of touched on, but an approach that feels very kind of Catholic social teaching aligned is journeying with someone or with a group of people rather than being prescriptive and saying, no, this is the right thing. This is and learning from them and just doing it more in a community is a good balance of energy giving and energy taking, because you don't feel like you're just going it alone anymore. Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. So for people who might want to learn how to journey with other people, do you have any recommendations that are outside of the Catholic social teaching,
I have the relation of
like
it. So
secular?
yeah, can I take this one first? Because I think Bill's
Please.
really good at it. And I learned a lot watching him kind of lead different meetings and even just how you approach it. But I think I think you need to listen as step number one and just understand other people's perspectives and all of that. And I come from a very big family. I was born and raised Catholic. I'm one of 10. And so there wasn't a ton of listening that happened in our family. There was a lot of like honing your debate skills so that you can be really right all the time and just beat the other person, which is useful sometimes. But in order to journey properly with someone, you really do need to kind of take a step back on yourself and really work to understand the other person, to understand where they're trying to go to, and then you can kind of mutually help each other in that rather than saying, oh no, this is the way we should go, and being more directive. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a secular resource that's helped both of us to grow in that is a book called Nonviolent Communication, by Marshall Rosenberg.
Yeah.
And the book was shared to me when I was working in this downtown parish by a friend who was a street outreach worker at another church. And it's been helpful not only for our work, but our marriage
Yeah,
in a big way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just talking actually with someone yesterday who is a practitioner of nonviolent communication and who's made it like a main part of all of the work that she does in trauma healing. So you're the second day to mention
It's
this
really
resource
great.
to me.
Yeah.
And I want to bring in high sensitivity because I know when we were preparing for the podcast, Bill, you shared that you identify as highly sensitive, and Anne, you do not. So I'm curious of like your individual experiences with it.
Yeah.
You can go first.
No, no. I mean, I hear a baby coming, so we're about to be interrupted with our youngest to unpause. I think being married to a highly sensitive person has been really good. I also have a number of siblings who are highly sensitive, and it took a really long time for us to understand each other. Because I think both of us went, or many of us went through like looking at the other person and be like, but why would you react that way? Why would you respond that way? And then we read the highly sensitive person book and just thought, oh, that's why. And my gosh, I've forgotten the question. I'm sorry.
I came across Elaine Aron's book around the time we were dating, and this is prior to the pandemic. Had a very active social life, and coming from a family with 9 siblings, there was always a gathering of some kind, and that book really resonated with me, obviously, but gave me a vocabulary to be able to express how something that would give you energy might be draining my own batteries as an introvert one, but particularly as a highly sensitive person as well. And then to be able to give myself the grace to have time to recover. And that's not a flaw of my personality character, because I can't, even if I get wiped out with playing with our kids faster than Anne might, I can bring a sensitivity that I feel is very unique to what I can give as a dad, to use another example.
Yeah, and I think I kind of wish we had started dating earlier in my career, because there were tensions that Bill picked up on that I did not, and I would just kind of blow right past. And so I would be talking about something that happened at work, and then you would have some input that was like, oh, well, maybe they felt a little under attack, or maybe they felt a little whatever. So I think it helps me just to realize that if that my perceptions are not everybody's perceptions, and that I need to leave a little more space for people to talk or to have people to process. Whereas I usually have a quick answer. And so I kind of expected others to have a quick answer as well. Yeah. So I think it just, I don't know, helped me to grow and understand different working styles and different approaches to the world and my own siblings.
Yeah, and Anne, you mentioned that you were more taught to debate as opposed to listen, right? So it makes sense that it was like, okay, this is a learning edge, learning, listening more as opposed to debating.
Yeah. But I think that it's not, I mean, yes, I think it's something you can learn as well as you have it kind of automatically. But I do think that there are certain traits and characteristics that you can kind of learn to become more sensitive, even if not totally highly sensitive. Oh, wow. Bill doesn't agree with me. Oh, my God.
No, it's not. I was just not sure whether to look at beyond it or you got in my own act about it as an HSP course.
Usually I start by asking people about the financial background of their childhood, but we're like 40 minutes into this conversation, which is good. It's just like explaining where you are, what you do, how you got there. Could you guys do like a short synopsis of the financial background of your childhood and how it may affect the work that you do today and whatever you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, so I was very fortunate to grow up in a stable 2-parent household with my sister, who's a year younger, and we never wanted for anything. We were able to take vacations as a family, usually once a year to Florida, went on a couple of European vacations in my teenage years, and went to private school. So I had a very privileged upbringing. My dad was a business owner. My mom stayed at home. And my grandfather, my dad's dad, had been a business owner as well. And it was impressed on me at various times maybe it stuck with me more than it was actually repeated, but that my dad was very proud of not inheriting his dad's business, but had built something for himself. So that uh, sense of self-reliance, wanting to be independent and not interdependent or heaven forbid, dependent was impressed on me. And I think has led to, decisions later in life about, hey, let's start our own business now. So that's a brief.
Yeah. Yeah. I think similarly, like I grew up, two-parent households. I've got 9 siblings. I'm a number 6 out of the 10. And though when we were chatting about it earlier, the thing that popped into my head was kind of independence and responsibility with money. So my parents were very much around contributing to the family community when you could. So if had a job at 13 or 14, then my part of my savings from that summer would go towards textbooks and uniform for the next year. Um, and then paying your way through university and all of that just by working through it. I would say my parents really valued education, so we all went to private schools as well, and that was kind of the priority spot for their money. And yeah, and then once you were working, if you were living at home, you were paying rent to my parents. That made it very attractive to move out. But again, I'd say there was a spirit there of kind of independence and self-reliance. And then with both my dad was a partner at PwC. He actually worked kind of in global learning and education there. So he had a very much a financial background. And my mom was at home with us, but also my parents helped start a school. So she was working at building that up and working in the back office of that and so it was actually chatting with her at different times and realizing that she really enjoyed having kind of intellectual outlet of a job, even though she also had 10 kids, which I feel like most people look at and say like, that's crazy. But I very much understand where she's coming from. So I think there was also kind of a seed of that from my parents as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So you're very much continuing kind of in the tradition that you saw of like having a full family, feeling that desire, that longing, and also honoring the fact that you want intellectual stimulation, intellectual
Yeah.
challenges.
Yeah.
Bill, I'm curious. So you had Hatch and Hatch, and that's a little bit of like taking a step back. So now you're going to be more interdependent with Francesco Collaborative. I wonder if that was part of the decision making. If at some point you're like, I want to be a self-employed, like make my business grow like my dad and my grandfather did. Was that latent anywhere, or were you like, no, this is the right next step?
I think given how much we love the Francesco collaborative community, it felt like a pretty natural next step.
I think there also was like a bit of isolation, especially when it was more solo you working on client work. That when we started working with Francesco, it was really nice to have people to bounce ideas off of and to work more in a team dynamic again. So I think that was part of it as well. Yeah.
And Deanna, ironically, when I talk to my parents these days, they are less interested about the business. And when they hear that I have something that sounds like a full-time job, they are super excited. so, so that is a little, counteracts that a bit as well. Probably be the same way when I'm or when our kids are older.
Yeah.
Yeah. Both of my parents were entrepreneurs, and I remember my dad for the past 10 years has been asking me like, why do you work for someone else? Like it just never made that.
Maybe they know how hard it is. They're really
Or again, like you'd be so good working in a big company. It was like, and it feels like kind of a backhanded compliment. It's not.
We've briefly talked about what the Francesco Collaborative is. Would you mind like maybe putting on your Nat Weaver hat and talking a little bit more about that, and also if when people want to join different cohorts, when that could happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So Francesco Collaborative is a movement of change makers, asset stewards, investment managers, business owners who share a sense that there's something wrong with finance as usual. And we're not sure what the new system looks like. A phrase I heard recently was we need to hospice the old system in order to midwife the new system. So this is a group of practitioners who are all sharing that sense. The movement itself began in response to an invitation from Pope Francis in 2018 to reimagine what the global economy could look like if it truly prioritized care for creation and care for those on the margins. And since its humble beginnings, now over 250 participants have gone through the introductory program, which is called the Livable Future Investing Workshop. So what would investment that's not extractive of human capital, of environmental capital, what would investment that is livable future investing really look like? How can we take those messy steps together of figuring that out and building this movement? So the next cohort is starting on October 19th of this year, 2024. And if you'd like to learn more, you can visit francescocollaborative.org/info, INFO. And I'm sure Diana will include this link in the podcast description.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And there's like 2 or 3 cohorts that happen every year, right?
Yeah. And Diana, I'd love to hear you share what your experience was, but it's, an opportunity for 20 or 30 people to journey together over virtually over 3 to 4 week period and really wrestle with this question of what is my own most important work. And I just love that grounding in each of our own personal experiences, because it is from that we can then, I truly believe that we can then begin to change, the bigger systems that we're confronting.
That we're confronting and that we're a part of, right? For
Absolutely.
for me, when I was first considering joining one of the cohorts, I had a big hang up around being Catholic. Actually, that was a big reason for me not to want to do it. And I heard an interview with Cynthia Bourgeot, who's a lot into wisdom practices. I don't know if either of you are familiar with her. She's one of the teachers at the Center for Action and Contemplation with Father Richard Rohr. And she was saying that when you have like conflict with your mother religion, which was for me being Catholic, then whatever spiritual path you choose in response, if you choose one, even if you don't choose one, will often be a reaction to that initial conflict. So I am Quaker, and Quakers are like as far from Catholic as you can get. Like we barely have any traditions, and as Catholics, it's always like you sit, you stand, you pray. There's all of this. There's this huge creed,
Yeah.
and Quakers, their creed is like 9 sentences, right? So I kind of just questioned in myself, like I love the new spiritual path that I've picked, but where might it be a reaction to something else? And because I work in finance, this felt like the easiest way to start to rebuild my relationship with finance. It was
That's cool.
so, I'm like, okay, I understand numbers, I understand investments, but certified financial planner, like I can go in with this stance and start to open up my mind to be more flexible.
Yeah.
Right. And I found it incredibly helpful. I found I love journeying with other people, being part of community. It gave me a sense of a wider vision of what Catholicism is outside of like its role as an empire religion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just another tool, right? Like whatever it is that's supportive for people to make these big changes, right? Because when you're looking at not profit maximization, but mission, like impact, having really firm, steady grounding and having other people with you makes it possible to really make those changes. I think it gave me more language on how to do this. It gave me a bigger and it gave me a sense of more, even more purpose, seeing that I'm part of a much larger community because I work for natural investments. I also do money coaching. We're like 20 people, right?
Yeah.
Francesco Collaborative is much bigger, and seeing the similarity of the missions across different language again felt like I'm not just here with this crazy single idea. I'm really part of something bigger.
Yeah, we definitely found that as well. Because I think when we first started looking for our own personal investments, we were chatting with people working in banks, chatting with people who had kind of done phase aligned investing, and just realized like, no, this really doesn't exist in Canada. And we felt very, very alone in that for a little while. Like, oh, maybe it doesn't exist because it's impossible. Like you just can't move this forward in any way. And I think Francesca was the first time where we thought like, oh no, there's a lot of really bright, engaged people who are working on this. And that's super exciting.
Yeah, and not only that it exceeded our hope, but that it was such a profound experience being in that space with you, Deanna, and with others who showed up very vulnerably about where they were at. And my hang up going into that workshop was that grown up secular, I'd worked in a very secular financial role. And now here I was showing up again with finance professionals as like a crazy religious convert who has been working for multiple years in different faith contexts. And I felt very insecure about that because I know how I used to think about religious people in my younger years. So just that we were all able to level set around where we were really showing up from, I found so powerful. And then obviously lean into all of the rich commonality that there was too.
Well, and I think they did a great job of creating that space where you could be vulnerable for everybody, regardless of where you were on the faith spectrum and where you were on the finance spectrum, and just showing up as yourself and being like, okay, now what next?
Yeah, it's a really beautiful setup. Also on the sensitivity spectrum, right? Because it has sections that you can do asynchronously, like through the message board. There's also the invitation for like weekly meetings with other people. Like it really, like whatever your nervous system can take, like it will respond well to it. And I forgot your third child's name, but I know that they're now on the frame. Yeah.
Yes, it's a
Do you want to
funny story.
introduce them?
This is James.
Hi, James, the third hatch on screen.
Yeah, it was very much what parenting three children and having a company looks like.
And that's awesome, right? That we can even that you even have the flexibility to bring it all together. And at working at Francesco Collaborative, I know that I think everyone on the team has young children.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been a gift for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I feel like we're kind of like at a natural wrapping up point. Oh, actually, well, there's one more thing I wanted to share. I don't know if this is your experience, Bill, but for myself, as a highly sensitive person, I'm always looking for, I guess, community as I'm creating things that are new. Because if highly sensitive people are like 20% of the population, it means that you're always kind of going against what 80% of the population is saying.
Yeah, the practices of kind of renewal and grounding. I definitely try to organize our schedule so that there's less most of our meetings are towards the middle of the week.
Yeah.
And then Monday and Friday, this is a very practical example. Monday and Friday can be sort of either, decompressing at the end of the week or preparing for the week to come and leaning into that love of doing the deep work or the deep thinking and the writing in particular or preparation for something.
Yeah, I think too, having even time between meetings to kind of reflect, decompress and whatever before you jump onto another one has been really helpful as well. And then also realizing that you need a quieter environment, I think has been helpful because sometimes that doesn't happen at home, shockingly. Yeah. And also even just your morning and your kind of daily routine of how you start the day and how you finish the day. Just so you can transition well into family life and it's not so jarring for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I have affirmations that I read, like, I work enough, I am enough, I
Mm.
do enough, my work gives me what I need for right living, and it feeds my relationships. But no, I think I'm still longing for that more supportive community of people who share those aspirations, who are deeply mission oriented and want to do good and have an impact, but also really appreciate that the how is just as important as the what, and are aspiring to do it in a way that feels balanced and healthy. So if you have suggestions,
That's for sure.
Yeah. And I know for myself, it's like I want the entire process to feel fully integrated with myself, like any kind of dissonance, and it feels like a huge hitch where maybe it isn't as much as I think it is. Yeah. So it's a learning edge. It's been such a pleasure to have both of you and to see James too, to meet James.
yeah,
And
you too, Diana.
Yeah, it's been lovely.
And that wraps up our conversation with Ann and Bill Hatch. Their story reminds us that it's possible to combine our deepest values with our financial decisions to create meaningful change. Whether you're inspired to explore impact investing, curious about Catholic social teaching, or looking for ways to balance your mission driven work with family life, I hope you found value in today's discussion. Remember, if you're interested in learning more about faith aligned investing, check out the Francesco Collaborative. They have new cohorts for livable futures starting throughout the year. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate, review, and share it with others who might find it helpful. Until next time, this is Diana Yanez reminding you that your sensitivity is a strength, especially in the world of finance.